Answer. 60 The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com. Smart speaker and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson. If you're the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and over the weekend on a program called Outside the Beltway, hosted by John Frederick. His candidacy, like a conviction and a sentencing and an imprisonment. Here's how that went.
You get these indictments, there ends up, you got to join D.C., you get convicted and sentenced for president, if you're sentenced.
There's nothing in the Constitution to say that radical left crazies are saying, no, that wouldn't stop. And it wouldn't stop me either. These people are sick.
Well, you can understand why he's encouraged. New York Times Siena poll out this morning has Trump up by 37 points on Ron DeSantis, 54-7. More than 3% of the vote. Now, polls, this was registered voters, not likely voters. To some extent, because likely voters are the ones who vote. It doesn't, that's not inconsistent with the spread we've seen in virtually all of the polling. So it just gives you a sense that these indictments, the charges, the additional charges in the classified docs case last week, they are not heard exactly as I predicted. It is all seen largely as the same fruit from the same poisonous tree. Over at CNN, which undercuts argument against Trump. This from analyst Harry Enton. The chance of Trump winning another term is very real. If I was Trump, I'd be cutting wants him to do. But regardless, the point is, if you can't present data that suggests hypothetical matchups against Biden or Newsom or whoever, then it convince people the Trump can't win and you can. You have to show me that you have a significant spread between in those matchups such that, it's clear that you're the stronger candidate in a general election. Then I'll listen to that argument. But getting into the weeds and talking about is not something that most people are going to have the bandwidth. You can run an insurgent campaign against Trump on, in my view. That's a political matter. Let's talk about the legal matters. And to help us with that, we're pleased to be joined by George Parry, former federal and state prosecutor, a regular knowledgeisgood.net. George, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be with you.
So let's talk about the new legal developments. The first being this letter that came from the Southern District of New York over the weekend, imploring the judge in the Devon Archer case to compel him to report to serve his year-and-a-day sentence. A lot of people saw the timing of that as a bit suspicious, 48 hours before he used to testify this morning before the House Oversight Committee.
Well, I find it to be very unusual. Would be in the office on Saturday writing letters. Look, I'm prejudiced. I was in the organized crime and racketeering section, the organized crime strike forces. We worked 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It was no big deal for us to be running around on the streets on a Saturday or a Sunday or in the middle of attorneys' offices had very gentlemanly existences. They were
Right.
they were there Monday through Friday. So yeah, I was surprised that this guy was writing this letter to the judge. Oh, Judge, the Second Circuit just affirmed Archer's conviction yesterday. So what are you going to do about having him report for prison? So yeah, that was unusual. But was it an effort? You couldn't really say. Oh, and by the way, they rescinded that letter. Or they retracted. Oh, we're not trying to intimidate the guy. We don't want there to be any mistake about that. Yeah, that just broke this morning. Sunday, saying disregard previous letter or what? We're not trying to intimidate the guy. Yeah, okay, fine.
But doesn't I mean they're corrupt to the core? Because I saw it. I know a lot of Americans saw it as a form of intimidation.
Yeah. Oh, listen. I mean, you want corruption? Take a look at what happened last. The DOJ, the Justice Department. I have an article out this morning in the American Spectator where I refer to the Justice Department as a RICO enterprise. They tried to pull a scam off on Hunter Biden's plea deal to 2 misdemeanor tax charges and a diversion agreement on the gun charge. What they tried to do in paragraph 15 of the diversion agreement on the gun charge, they said, well, we're not going to prosecute if he keeps his nose clean, and no pun intended there, 4 months, we won't prosecute him on the gun charge. And oh, by the way, we won't prosecute him for the matters referred to in the plea agreement on the tax charges. Well, the matters in the plea agreement had to do with Burisma, Ukraine, China, and his overseas dealings. And they didn't give that provision to the judge until an hour before the hearing.
Right.
They tried to blow it past her, and she caught them at it. And so she blew up the deal. So they're back to, trying to concoct another scheme, and they'll be back in 30 days to give it another shot.
I want to get to Hunter in a second, but just on this matter of Devin Archer. So what I don't understand. If there was an attempt to intimidate, what's the play? You've been convicted. You know what your sentence is. So how is that intimidating?
Well, if you look at it, it could be just a not so subtle reminder to Devin that, by the way, when all of this testifying you're supposed to be doing, you're going to be ours. You're going to be in the care and custody of the U.S. Bureau of Prisons, which reports to the big guy, Joe Biden.
I guess. I mean, but so that's it's all built into the price. I mean, I hate to be in the position of defending DOJ, but I don't really see the play here.
It makes a good talking point.
Yeah. Well, on the Hunter Biden thing, what's your? I mean, if you're repping Hunter Biden, I don't want to go to trial. The last thing I want to do is go to trial. So on their side, I'm talking about Hunter Biden's defense team. They have to be saying, okay, well, we tried to get this thing done and no jail time, and we got caught with our hands. And so, all right, here's the deal. You're going to have to do some time. So you're still going to have to follow something approximating what people who normally are convicted of this obvious tax fraud scheme. We'll do a couple of years. You get an address in 12, 14 months. But you're gonna but they have to cut another plea deal, don't they? There's no way they go to trial.
Well, they could go ahead with the plea agreement that they had. Is correct. They don't want to go to trial on this because if they go to trial on this, you're going to get into the tax evasion scheme that Hunter was involved in, and that gets you into all of his dealings in Ukraine and China and all the other overseas places, all of the suspicious activity reports that were submitted by the banks concerning those. And there's going to be the risk of them having to actually discuss Hunter Biden's father, the big guy, involvement in all of this, and they don't want that. But the original plea agreement, it was just a sweetheart deal. It was so sweet that just reading about it made my fillings ache.
Right.
They had a deal that they could still go ahead with, where
only if
Hunter would plead guilty to 2 tax misdemeanors. He can only get a maximum of 1 year on each misdemeanor, and there would be the recommendation of the Justice Department that he get no time, but the judge doesn't have to follow the recommendation.
Right. It seems
a very sweet deal.
Yeah, but right, and she obviously was reading all the press around this too. I mean, she doesn't live in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
That same deal as if Department of Justice makes it explicit between the two parties, which is a curious deal to bring to a judge when you're like, well, no, we think it's a cap out, and they don't think it's a cap out because the justice couldn't say it's a cap out.
Because she could accept that deal, and she would still be free to impose a 1 year sentence on each of the misdemeanor charges. So yeah, it's not don't in the water. It's not over with.
Yeah.
But it does raise the question of what are the legal geniuses at the Department of Justice going to come up with in terms of trying to play another round of dupe the judge in 30 days' time. And that's going to be very interesting to see what they do come up with.
All right. Meanwhile, today, President Trump's property manager, Carlos de Oliveira, is scheduled to appear in a Miami courtroom. What evidence? I mean, he allegedly, what I read into this weekend, he allegedly told a friend, quote unquote, the boss wanted a server deleted. But do they have more than just hearsay?
I don't know. I've read about the case, and I don't know exactly what their evidence is in that matter. I mean, they've increased the charges and they're rearranging the approach they're going to take on this. But I don't see it as anything that is really going to be taken seriously. I mean, Trump's major advantage in this is that the trial will be down in the Palm Beach area of southern Florida. And he could actually get a fairly decent jury down there, as opposed to all the other jurisdictions where he's being indicted, where they'll just take him outside and hang him up to a light pole.
Yeah.
He has a fair shot at getting a fair and impartial jury. And so if people... I mean, I'm not particularly offended at the idea that the president wants to maintain custody and control of records from his administration.
So, just on the sequencing of adding this guy, the property manager, to the the alleged conspirators, Trump and his other. Is that because they were trying to flip the property manager? They couldn't flip him, so they charged him.
Yeah, I mean, I think they first of all hoped to flip Nada because he was more directly involved in moving boxes around and everything. Apparently, Nada's hanging tough, and they took a run at the property manager. They'd like to have somebody on the quote inside close quote of the conspiracy,
right?
And I think that's what they're trying to do here. And look, if you're this poor schlub as a property manager and you're hearing this stuff, he may very well go for the deal. It would certainly be, something to work with from the prosecution standpoint. Not a lot, but it'd be something to work with.
He is George Parry, former federal and state prosecutor, regular contributor to the American Spectator. He blogs at knowledgeisgood.net. George Parry, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Okay.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
A storm is on the horizon, and you need to keep the lights on no matter what. Your business relies on the power being on 24/7. It's the lifeblood of your data and computer systems. Weather-related outages from the power company are not acceptable. Your need for a source of power that's reliable 24/7, along with round-the-clock service that can dispatch technicians to your site